In the theatre of ancient warfare, you might expect steel-clad generals and roaring battle cries. But before Rome's legions marched, the first sound heard was often the soft rustle of feathers. Beneath the shadow of marble temples, sacred chickens, the puli, sacri, pecked at grain, each peck a whisper of the god's will. Picture this: a Roman camp, the tension of impending conflict hangs heavy. Soldiers pause, their fate resting on the undisturbed crunch of seed under beak. It's a world where battles balance on fragile wings. Here, where history meets divination, we'll unravel the tales of chickens steering the tides of war. In the shadowy realms of history, let's step into a tale saturated with ominous stillness, where the fate of Roman legions hung on the quiet murmurs of sacred chickens, long before the resounding clang of swords echoed across battlefields. An unusual ritual unfolded, a ritual steeped in feathered divination that could bring victory or herald disaster. This is the story of how birds, not blades, guided the destinies of the ancient Roman military machine. Omens were deeply woven into the tapestry of Roman life, acting as the gods' whispered directions. To Romans, everyday signs, whether in the rustle of leaves or the passage of stars, were crucial threads of divine communication. Birds, however, captured a special spot in this celestial dialogue. The practice of interpreting these signs, especially through the sacred chickens, was quintessential to every major decision, particularly in times of war. For Romans, strategy was not formed solely by men, but collaboratively with the divine, often guided by a chicken's simple peck. The technique to unravel this divine mystery was called augury, where priests trained as augurs interpreted messages from the gods through birds. These augurs served as essential bridges between human uncertainty and divine foresight. While it may seem mystical, this procedure was meticulously organised, with augurs closely observing every twitch and cluck of the chickens for hints about a favourable or ominous future. Military decisions, as such, were never truly completed without consulting these sacred birds. Enter the puli sacri, the sacred chickens destined for these significant auguries. Far from being common fowl, they were revered as invaluable assets. Each bird was selected not by its plumage, but for its perceived spiritual connection, housed in elaborate coops, and tended with devotion by a keeper known as the Polarius. This figure played a pivotal role, ensuring that every aspect of the chicken's care remained pristine. Charged with watching over these birds, the Polarius observed the feeding rituals with the keen eye of a devoted believer, looking for divine signals hidden in the birds' behaviours. As Roman forces prepared to set off a conquest, a ceremony centred around these puli sacri decided their course. Soldiers and generals gathered in silence as the Polarius released the chickens, inviting them to feed. Every action, from a vigorous peck to a reluctant nibble, was dissected for meaning, either affirming a path to battle or suggesting caution against it. With each peck, the troops found the strength of divine approval reinforcing their swords. However, this was not a mere theatrical prelude to war. It was a binding vow between the Romans and their gods, an intricate interaction that could abruptly change the course of history with the subtlest of signs. Military campaigns could be delayed or redirected entirely based on the chicken's counsel, showcasing the complex interplay between human and divine in the chaos of war. Today, this bond might seem fanciful, yet for the Romans, it represented a strategic element as vital as any weapon in their arsenal. But the tale of Rome and its sacred chickens isn't without its darker threads. Ignoring these divine omens wasn't without consequence, a truth underscored by the story of the Roman consul Claudius Pulcher. In a notorious moment of hubris during the First Punic War in 249 BC, Pulcher arrogantly dismissed the chickens' refusal to eat by casting them into the sea, saying, "Let them drink, if they won't eat." The gods, evidently displeased by this bold defiance, seemingly responded with a devastating naval defeat for the Romans, a stark reminder that disregard for divine signs came at great peril. Pulcher's tale serves as a cautionary legend, echoing through the ages, about the perils of ignoring centuries-old traditions. His act wasn't merely a tactical error, it was a sacrilegious breach that went straight to the heart of Roman spiritual beliefs. This story, retold over generations, warned of the cosmic balance between human ambitions and divine ordinances, illustrating how deeply intertwined Rome's spirituality was with its military might. Embedded deep within the Roman military machine, the Polarius held a position of quiet influence, seamlessly blending spiritual oversight with administrative duty. His was a custodial role, safeguarding the sanctity of the Augurs, ensuring that no mortal interference tainted divine messages. Through his hands, sacred feathers transformed into tools of fate, influencing generals and determining the very course of battles, an extraordinary testament to faith in the unseen. Reflecting on this blend of sacred chickens with warfare, one can see their impact extending beyond mere folklore. They were crucial to the Roman endeavour to harmonise everyday chaos with divine order. Their legacy, long after they ceased to dictate strategies, endured in the hearts and practices of the civilizations within Rome's sphere. Not only spears and swords shaped Rome's destiny, a chicken's simple peck often inked the pages of history. In this elegantly strange dance of fate, devotion and duty, the clucks and chirps of sacred chickens charted the course of empires. In ancient Rome, the role of augur was both exalted and enigmatic, a bridge between the mortal world and the divine. These interpreters of the god's will held sway over decisions of monumental importance, from state rituals to warfare tactics. Trained from a young age, an augur's education was rigorous, delving into not just religious rites but an understanding of avian behaviour, the celestial order, and even the subtleties of thunder. Their profound knowledge enabled them to divine omens from all manner of natural phenomena, catering these divine messages to suit the needs of Rome's political and military ambitions. At the heart of Roman society, augurs formed a sacred college, a select group whose interpretations could influence the outcome of political debates and military campaigns. Their importance was an emblem of the Roman belief that celestial forces dictated the empire's destiny. The augur's voice was recognised as the voice of fate itself. They were figures of authority, present at significant events, inaugurating temples, overseeing public spectacles, and weighing in on crucial military decisions. Their readings were considered the very language of the heavens, essential to Rome's expansionist strategies and societal cohesion. Amid their toolkit of signs and portents, sacred chickens, or pulli sacri, held a unique place. These revered birds served as direct mediums for divine will. The ritual was simple, yet steeped in gravity. Grain scattered before these chickens, and their every peck interpreted as a sign. If they ate heartily, the omens were favourable. A refusal spelled disaster or advised caution. This mundane act had substantial sway, guiding generals toward decisions that could alter the course of history. The dependence on sacred chickens highlights the peculiar blend of practicality and mysticism within Roman culture. As augurs relied on these birds for their straightforward interpretations, they ensured that divine insight was ever present beside Roman legions. Beyond the chickens, augurs employed a richly varied toolkit, one that would make even modern meteorologists envious. They read omens from the skies, cloud patterns, the rumble of thunder, and even silence. Each held its own significance, a subtle form of communication from the gods. Thunder especially, with its formidable presence, was a potent indicator. The timing and direction of storms could embolden generals with visions of divine support, or sicken them with foreshadowed catastrophe. Yet even the rare hush of nature, a sudden quieting of birds or an eerie silence, was as telling as any rolling storm, signalling moments of introspection or reconsideration. These elemental readings further elevated the augur's role beyond mere religious ceremony to that of revered strategic advisor. In Rome's expansionist era, generals often delayed military actions, adhering scrupulously to the augur's interpretations. An unfavourable reading, like a sullen chicken's refusal to eat, could halt a campaign entirely, highlighting the delicate balance between faith and strategy. The weight given to these omens reflects Rome's acute anxiety over divine judgments, a culture where martial prowess was believed to depend upon the favour of the gods. The augur, then, was as integral to military command as Rome's most seasoned generals, a crucial arbiter between human ambition and celestial decree. In politics too, the augur's influence was profound. Their approval authenticated rituals, consolidating political power by merging it with the divine. By blessing public ceremonies, augurs stitched faith and governance into the fabric of Roman life. This intertwining permitted leaders to wield religious sanction as a political tool, drawing legitimacy from divine consultation. The intricacy of their position allowed them to sway political decisions, blessing rulers with their interpretations in times of public or personal uncertainty. A favourable omen united public sentiment, whereas an ominous one demanded careful re-evaluation. The path to becoming an augur was demanding, requiring years of disciplined study. Often, young aspirants were drawn from elite families, immersed in the sacred arts of divination. Their education spanned theology, philosophy, and natural sciences, and included apprenticeships with seasoned augurs, studying everything from the inflection in bird calls to movements of heavenly bodies. Each detail was committed to memory, ensuring the accuracy of their interpretations. This rigorous training underpinned Roman culture, perpetuating an oral tradition and an intellectual elite tasked with preserving Rome's spiritual integrity. Yet their role did not escape scrutiny. As rationalism began to creep into Roman thought, some skeptics saw augury as susceptible to manipulation. Their predictions, some argued, served ambitious leaders who could sway omens to their benefit. This tension prompted heated debate over the credibility of divine readings, particularly in political spheres where augurs exerted substantial influence. Despite such challenges, the institution of augury proved resilient, adapting its practices to remain relevant. Scholars folded new philosophies and methodologies from across the empire into existing traditions, ensuring augury's continued centrality. As Rome morphed from republic to empire, augury evolved alongside it, reflecting the complexities of a burgeoning society. Influences from conquered territories infused new myths and insights, enriching the augur's toolbox. Despite these adaptations, the core principles held steady, offering a window into the resolute adaptability of Roman culture. The enduring legacy of augury offers testament to humanity's timeless quest to understand the unseen forces that shape our world, a pursuit as meaningful today as it was in ancient Rome. In ancient Rome, the Polarius was an esteemed figure, a priest burdened with the divine duty of interpreting the cryptic messages delivered through sacred chickens. This role demanded not only a deep understanding of avian behaviour, but an unwavering reverence for ritual. The Polarius wasn't merely a caretaker of birds, he was the bridge between the earthly ambitions of man and the unpredictable whims of the gods. In the midst of a bustling Roman military camp, where the sounds of clashing swords and shouted commands filled the air, the henhouse was a place of solemnity and focus. The clucks and fluttering wings were interpreted with a precision that bordered on a dance with the divine. Each gesture of the Polarius, from the scattering of grain to the timing of the feeding ritual, was steeped in significance, as if caught between two worlds, the tangible and the ethereal. The tradition of using birds to decipher the future had roots that stretched back far before the Romans set foot on the stage of history. The Etruscans, Rome's forerunners in many religious practices, also sought answers in the sky's feathered inhabitants. However, it was Rome that refined this practice, focusing intensely on chickens for their interpretive needs. These commonplace creatures were a constant presence, their familiar routines lending themselves perfectly to such divination. Chickens, reliable and ever-present, became more than mere poultry. They were seen as conduits for the godly messages the Romans so desperately sought to understand. Rituals surrounding these sacred animals resembled religious sacraments rather than simple feedings. Morning saw the preparation of grains that were more than sustenance. They were carefully selected and believed to attract divine favour. As the sun rose, so did the hopes of generals who watched these rituals unfold with bated breath. In the otherwise chaotic camp, the area where sacred birds fed transformed into something akin to a sanctum, where even the rustle of grain could hold a legion's fate. The Polarius, dressed in modest attire that belied his power, would quiet the tumult with a gesture. Every peck into the grain was watched by hopeful eyes. Each morsel consumed or ignored hinted at success or warned of doom. In the confines of this sacred henhouse, the simple act of a chicken eating became an event of cosmic scale. The birds' reactions were scrutinised closely. Did the chickens eat with eager gusto, promising good fortune, or did they show reluctance, warning of setbacks? The scenes were rife with tension, as even a simple graze of the beak across the earth had the power to alter the course of mighty endeavours. For commanders poised for battle, the chicken's hesitancy might demand patience, a bitter testing of willpower, as they postponed their grand strategies not on military grounds, but at the behest of a few silent beaks. These chickens consumed more than mere food. The grains they pecked were imbued with spiritual significance. Each was selected and blessed, believed capable of unlocking messages from the gods themselves. The food was more than nourishment. It was the key to understanding divine whispers, reflecting Rome's complex spiritual landscape. Yet beneath this veil of reverence, whispers of manipulation lingered. There were tales of grains carefully filtered to tip the scales towards fortune or doom, a blend of faith and deceit that underscored the tremulous balance of power between man and the celestial. For the uninitiated, the henhouse might seem a curious oddity, yet to the Romans it was a vital oracle, an arena where humans and the divine communicated through clucks and scratches. Here the Polarius listened with more than ears. He sensed the nuances of each movement, a translator of an avian language that dictated life and death. This solemn task created an aura of reverence around these priests, often leading to legends that cast them as near mythical figures. Stories persisted of certain Polarii who single-handedly altered the fate of an entire legion by interpreting an omen correctly against the consensus of doubt. Within the camp, even the role of guarding these sacred spaces was seen as crucial. Attack or neglect brought the wrath of the divine, for these birds were seen not just as strategic assets, but as links to the very heart's whims of fate. Hen houses were protected rigorously, sites both sacred and vital, securing the communications that determined not just military tactics, but the favour of the gods themselves. Such sacred places were often targets for sabotage in the art of war-torn stratagem. Enemy spies might attempt to disrupt this divine dialogue with malicious intentions. Beyond Rome's borders, this tradition of avian augury resonated across cultures, from the Greeks peering skyward for signs, to the Byzantine rituals that still revered their feathered seers. As Rome's influence waned, the echoes of these rituals lived on, changing form but never fading into oblivion. They whispered through the corridors of new empires, reminders of a time when victories and defeats balanced on the flutter of wings and a peck in sacred earth, when the past reached out with feathered fingers into the hearts and minds of all who stood beneath the same expansive sky. In 249 BC, the First Punic War raged between Rome and Carthage, with the sea near Drepana set as the next stage of conflict. Rome, hungry for control, dispatched consul Publius Claudius Pulcher, a seasoned commander whose campaign blended military might and divine favour in a delicate dance. The Mediterranean waters, however, masked more than just the clash of ships. Beneath the surface lay sacrosanct rituals that would determine Rome's fate at sea. As the Roman fleet embarked, the air crackled with tension, charged by the unseen weight of divine opinion. This era, caught in the swirl of chaos, believed fervently in the gods' active role in human affairs. Before leaving port, an ancient ritual awaited, an omen from the sacred chickens whose behaviours foretold the potential outcome of battles. These fowls were no ordinary barnyard residents. They were revered as connectors to the divine. For Pulcher, their grain-pecking verdicts carried his career's balance and Rome's future. Yet, as fate would frown, the chickens refused to eat, signalling a celestial thumbs down. The refusal cast a foreboding shadow over Pulcher's endeavour, hinting at ruin atop the waves of Drepana. Aboard Pulcher's flagship, the Polarius, or Keeper of Sacred Chickens, began the ritual with a steady hand, scattering grain with reverent precision. Eyes fixed on the feathery harbingers, the tension was palpable, the air thick with anticipation. Yet the birds remained indifferent, their stillness roiling the silence with a prophecy of doom. In an age steeped in rituals, where divine approval was integral, the chickens' dismissal was tantamount to mutiny against Roman order. Pulcher stood at a crossroads. Rome took omens seriously as a pillar of its cultural and martial identity. The bird's non-compliance uttered a divine warning, challenging the empire's grand designs without celestial nods. Pulcher's choice reflected a storm of hubris and urgency. Casting the chickens into the sea, he decried, "If they won't eat, let them drink," a brazen act of defiance born from frustration and disbelief. It symbolised both practical resolve and disdain for divine tradition. The decision to disregard the omens bore ominous fruit. Sailing into Drepana, divine displeasure materialised tactically. Carthage, under Admiral Adherbal's adept guidance, seized upon Roman missteps. The Carthaginians, seasoned and cunning, launched a surprise at dawn, wielding their naval advantage with ruthless efficiency. The Roman fleet, unmoored from sacred endorsement, floundered in chaos and defeat. The resulting disaster was devastating. Rome lost over 90 ships and thousands of men, a humiliation seared into its maritime history. Pulcher's audacity in dismissing omens blended with strategic failings highlights a dual catastrophe, echoing through Roman society as a stark reminder of underestimating divine markers. The Drepana disaster became a cautionary tale, illustrating that Roman triumph depended not solely on martial prowess, but on divine alignment as well. In the aftermath, Rome viewed Pulcher's actions as sacrilege, a personal affront with grave consequences. The betrayal of divine expectations was a breach that transcended battlefield failure. Romans saw divine retribution at play, punishing human impiety with ruin. Pulcher's subsequent political downfall mirrored the gods' perceived anger, condemned by the Senate, ridiculed society-wide. While his end remains debated, whether censured or driven to despair, the message was clear. Disregard for divine decrees invited wrath, unravelling human endeavours. Drepana evolved into folklore, etched with lessons of humility and the perils of hubris. Pulcher's tale entrenched itself as a moral cornerstone, cautioning against human arrogance. It warned of the folly in sidestepping cosmic order, ensuring Roman society ingrained these cultural mantras into its fabric. Generations later, the tale still echoed. More than a historical failure, it was a saga of faith and authority, enveloping Rome's consciousness in timeless fable. The battlefield loss demanded reflection, altering Rome's military ethos to emphasise religious rites and omens. Pulcher's fall reshaped leadership perceptions, urging future commanders towards a tapestry of strategy and spirituality. The spillover from Drepana reinforced the bond between divine observance and martial success, curbing ambitious leaders with foresight and caution to prevent God's ire. The Polarius, guardian of sacred hens, emerged with reverence renewed. Beyond ceremonial tasks, their decisions bore strategic weight, shaping campaign outcomes. Post-Drepana scrutiny shaped their role as pivotal. Manipulating augury meant steering Rome's destiny. Pulcher's downfall extended its moral reach, representing Rome's disdain for arrogance against tradition. His story reminded of faith's primacy over individualism, focusing public discourse not merely on tactical failure, but on cultural consequences. Though initially vilified, Pulcher transformed in the Roman psyche, his defiance reconstructed as a complex narrative interrogating the interplay of faith, fate, and folly. Drepana's broader impact urged Rome to align religio-military endeavours. Beyond immediate loss, it spurred introspection on cultural mechanisms where omens governed imperial destiny. Rome integrated lessons diplomatically, crafting an expansive empire attentive to shared beliefs, a duality of human ingenuity and divine consultation. The disaster at Drepana extended beyond its historical bounds, sowing its lessons into Rome's enduring ethos. Its story exemplifies the fragility and strength in uniting divine favour with human ambition. Passed down through ages, it underscores a lasting wisdom resonating in both legacy and caution, a testament to the blending of faith and power in forging empires. In the world of Roman military strategy, where decisiveness was a prized trait among commanders, there existed a curious exception: the sacred peck of the augural chickens. Imagine the scene: vast Roman legions brought to a standstill, commanders in robust armour pacing restlessly, all awaiting the divine approval conveyed by the pecking of their feathered oracles. These sacred birds held sway over movements that could sway the fate of empires, with entire armies waiting patiently, sometimes for days, to see whether the chickens would gorge themselves on grain. A simple act of feeding took on monumental importance, with the potential to dictate the course of entire campaigns. A hungry bird often signalled triumph, while a sated or indifferent one could halt an army in its tracks, turning a meticulously crafted strategy into an unwelcome waiting game. Roman soldiers found themselves camped not at strategic locations, but wherever these winged prophets decreed. The basest of impulses, the appetite of a bird, managed to weave unpredictability into the otherwise precise Roman war engine. Frustration might reign as adversaries, sensing the tension, could use these delays to reposition, reinforce, or even escape the grip of Rome's advancing might. In this strange dance, the chickens didn't just predict destiny, they actively shaped it, revealing a curious blend of practicality and spirituality in the Roman military. Amidst these camps, anticipation was palpable. Soldiers, their breath clouding the air, whispered prayers to coax the chickens into compliance, blending military discipline with spiritual pleading. The fires crackled in the chill of the night, and officers recounted tales of past auguries, some triumphant, others disastrous, to maintain morale during these enforced pauses. Such delays tested the resolve of the Roman forces, demanding patience from men more accustomed to the clash of swords than the patience of watching chickens peck. This calm before the storm offered a brief respite, a chance for soldiers to gather themselves, not just in arms but in spirit, as they waited for a signal that would dictate their next move. Curiously, these pauses, although seemingly inconvenient, occasionally proved beneficial. They allowed commanders to regroup and re-evaluate strategies under the guise of divine intervention. Commanders turned necessity into opportunity, using these moments for deeper reconnaissance and logistical recalibrations. Claiming divine sanction for these pauses, they faced little criticism for what otherwise might be seen as indecisiveness. Roman generals learned to blend caution with strategy, waiting until fate and readiness coalesced perfectly, guided by every twitch of a beak or rustle of a feather. Yet these same chickens proved unwitting allies to nimble enemies able to exploit Rome's immobilization. Savvy opponents quickly learned that an army pausing for augury might be one caught off guard, a chance to launch daring operations or mount last-ditch defences. The chickens, symbols of divine will, sometimes inadvertently brokered peace for those they should have helped to conquer. In these strange turns, the feathered allies of Rome whispered tales across campfires, their influence rippling through both friend and foe as they became entangled in the grand web of strategy and superstition. The reliance on these birds provides a window into Roman culture, a civilization adept at weaving mysticism into the fabric of war. This marriage of the tangible with the ethereal casts a long shadow on our understanding of Roman pragmatism, a culture that could embrace both tactical brilliance and divine consultation, offering a fascinating glimpse into the past complexity. The ritual of chicken augury highlights how intertwined the martial and mystical worlds were, shaping not just individual battles, but the broader narrative of Roman history. Yet the reliance on avian divination was not without its darker moments. Human frailty occasionally interplayed with augural misinterpretation, leading to mishaps and blunders. Commanders, grappling with the responsibility of interpreting these divine signs, bore the weight of any missteps. Even in the face of strategic misfortunes, Rome managed to integrate lessons learned, refining their approach to embrace both spiritual guidance and practical insight. This recalibration highlighted the necessity of balance, where faith was important, but not without the grounding clarity of human intellect. Moreover, the temptation to manipulate these divine signs for personal gain was a lingering threat. Instances of deceit surfaced, with cunning Polarii fabricating results to sway the outcomes of campaigns. These betrayals challenged not only the accuracy of augury, but the very core of faith itself. Upon uncovering such treachery, Rome doubled down on maintaining truthfulness and integrity, reminding themselves and others that the essence of the augural practice lay beyond simple manipulation, anchored deeply in a commitment to understanding and connection with the divine. As the empire expanded and grew ever more intricate, the struggle to balance tradition and rationality became more pronounced. The Roman reliance on chickens for augury was periodically questioned, and as new knowledge systems emerged, the ancient practice gradually waned. Rational military assessments gained prominence, supplanting superstition with empirical understanding. Yet even as this shift occurred, the legacy of such augury stayed woven into the cultural consciousness, speaking to the intrinsic human desire to merge the celestial with the corporeal, the divine with the martial. Ultimately, the saga of Rome and its sacred chickens is not merely one of peculiar ritual, but of the greater quest for meaning in a world where the physical and spiritual often collided. It reflects humanity's ongoing endeavour to decode celestial intentions through mundane acts and to find guidance amid chaos, demonstrating that in the heart of an empire that once spanned continents, even the flutter of wings held profound significance. In the high-stakes world of ancient Rome, where the outcome of battles often pivoted on the delicate peck of a chicken, deceit found fertile ground. Augury, the sacred art of interpreting the will of the gods through the behaviour of birds, was a practice fraught with pressure. Roman generals, their ambitions tethered to divine favour, were impatient for omens that could sway the course of wars. An unfavourable sign could bring a campaign to a halt, unravel supply lines, and dampen the spirits of soldiers longing for action. Thus, the temptation for manipulation loomed large over the Polarii, the keepers of these prophetic creatures. Often, they resorted to cunning tactics to coerce favourable signs from the sacred chickens. Starvation was a common ploy, keeping the birds hungry until they would ravenously peck at any grain offered, a sure sign of divine approval. Such trickery did not go unnoticed. The Romans held religious protocols in high regard, linking them closely to military success and the state's destiny. Suspicions of falsified auguries threatened not only the Polarius' authority, but also the legitimacy of military strategies. Historical records reveal that on many occasions, fraud led to investigations and harsh punishments. Despite these measures, the system remained susceptible to human deceit, turning fabricating omens into an intrinsic element of warfare. The Polarii occupied a unique niche within the Roman military hierarchy as interpreters of divine will, their roles requiring religious expertise and a sharp grasp of human psychology. They were revered yet closely watched by their superiors, who relied on their interpretations. The fine line between being a guardian of omens and a charlatan was perilously thin. Some Polarii upheld their duty with integrity, while others, driven by pressure or greed, orchestrated deceptions for personal gain or favour with influential generals. Manipulating the sacred chickens extended beyond mere bribery. In a setting where campaign schedules were dictated by weather, enemy movements, and divine signs, feeding rituals could be artfully manipulated. Roman military demands sometimes necessitated positive omens with urgency, leading polarii to starve their chickens to ensure overly enthusiastic pecking during rituals. This stark reality highlights a darker aspect of Roman life, where practical needs often trumped spiritual sincerity. Soldiers and lower-ranked officials occasionally criticised these underpinning practices, aware of the manipulative power wielded by those interpreting divine whispers. Bribing also infiltrated higher ranks, with generals sometimes opting for underhanded methods to secure their desired outcomes. By promising wealth, influence, or future glory, they transformed augury into a lucrative venture for polarii who, living modestly, were easily lured by the promise of riches. The gamble of bribery wasn't without risk. Exposure could mean public humiliation, yet many generals, eager for results, risked sacrilege to mould sacred will to mortal ends. Power dynamics in the military landscape were dictated as much by whispered promises as sword clashes. Amidst this culture of deceit, not all plots succeeded. Roman society, dedicated to maintaining the sanctity of its rituals, reacted sharply to deviations. Whispers of fraud in the augural process sometimes led to discreet investigations, ensuring that potential wrongdoing didn't discolour the revered practice. These secretive inquiries, though not always documented, underscored the tensions between faith and falsity. Trials could bring severe consequences, stretching from public disgrace to execution, depending on the deception's scope and the political climate at the time. Historical accounts recount prominent cases where deceit unravelled spectacularly. In one tale, a prominent military leader's manipulation of omens ended in ruin when a trusted Polarius was caught falsifying results on the eve of a critical battle, resulting in a devastating defeat seen as divine retribution. Such narratives show that dishonesty didn't just risk military outcomes, but had broader repercussions, potentially tarnishing reputations for generations. The conflation of bribery and manipulation became a narrative magnet within Roman culture, a testament to superstition's enduring grip. Rome, guided by law and divine forces, eventually saw the need to formalise measures against fraud in augury. Legal routes ensconced harsh penalties for deception, aiming to uphold the practice's integrity. Roman legal texts reference rules tailored to counteract augural deceit, demonstrating the significance of honest omens in religious and military spheres alike. Those caught in the act faced disgrace and severe punishments, showing Rome's commitment to maintaining sacred traditions despite ongoing human failings. Yet the human spirit persists. Despite the dangers of fraud, some polarii adapted, refining their deceit through creativity and desperation. Informal networks emerged, sharing knowledge on ritual manipulation and ensuring new methods were harder to detect. This evolution mirrored Rome's own adaptability, with polarii surviving by skillfully navigating the shifting expectations of their roles. This legacy of adaptation reflects Rome's dynamic nature, a civilization constantly adjusting to challenges. The enduring impact of Rome's reliance on augury echoes through history. Stories of divine deceit and miraculous omens have become embedded in cultural narratives, long influencing perceptions from the Middle Ages to modern times. These tales, though rooted in serious religious practice, also serve as potent storytelling devices, blending myth and reality. They encapsulate human imperfections and divine oversight, illustrating the complex interplay between ambition, faith, and the enduring, enchanting spirit of Roman augury, a dance between belief, power, and the ever-curious human will. In the grand political theatre of ancient Rome, where power and superstition entwined like the serpentine smoke from a sacred flame, omens wielded an extraordinary influence. It seems almost unbelievable now, feathered creatures dictating the tempo of military campaigns. But in a society where divine signs held sway, even the most ambitious senators bowed to the oracle of the beak. Rome's Senate, a crucible of political intrigue, relied on omens not only as messages from the gods, but also as tools of strategy. Sacred chickens, revered and closely watched, became unexpected players in the high-stakes game of statecraft, where a single peck could delay a campaign or provoke whispers of divine disapproval. The manoeuvrings within the Senate were as complex as those of any Roman legion. Among these machinations stood the pullarii, the keepers of these sacred birds. Though often overlooked, these men commanded respect, not through status or wealth, but through their unique role as interpreters of divine will. Senators, recognizing the labyrinthine power inherent in a chicken's appetite, learned to appeal to pullarii, their whispers woven with promises or threats, hoping to set the stage for political delay or advantage. Yet this power came with risk. Should any deceit surface, it threatened not only these priests, but the tangled webs of the senators themselves. It was a dance of shadow and light, where belief and manipulation wove together, transforming the pullarii into both spiritual guides and pawns in a larger political game. The Senate, a tapestry of competing interests and ambitions, used these omens as both bonds and blades. Factions clashed over whether these winged creatures embodied divine will or an opportunity to unravel rival schemes. Loyalists looked for favourable signs, rationalising their interpretations to support chosen strategies, while others seized upon unfavourable auguries to stall adversaries, creating breathing room for recalibration. The sacred chickens bore witness to a Senate divided, where personal ambition and a sense of duty to Rome entwined, with omens serving as the needle and thread that either sowed consensus or ripped at the seams of unity. History abounds with tales of how these omens could either buoy or buffet the ship of state. There is the account of a planned campaign brought to a halt by the fickle fowl, allowing an enemy alliance to gain strength, their forces knitting tighter while Roman legions waited under ominous skies. Another tale recounts a general advocating for prompt aggression, his efforts thwarted by his peers, invoking an inauspicious reading, saving Rome from a disastrous encounter with ill-fated weather. In each case, augury operated as both guardian and jailer, poised on the knife's edge between prudence and folly, cautioning against reckless ventures, but occasionally ensnaring opportunity in its weighty grasp. Roman debates about these sacred practices echoed through the marbled halls. For some, augury was the embodiment of Rome's eternal respect for tradition, ensuring the gods' favour and societal order. Others scrutinised it as an outdated relic, an anchor dragging behind the swift currents of an expanding empire. Leaders deliberated amid impassioned speeches, wrestling between holding fast to their religious roots or cutting loose to navigate the uncharted waters of reform. Divine deference versus pragmatic governance, a timeless tussle played out against the backdrop of Rome's rising and setting sun, with augury at the fulcrum of each decision. In the charged atmosphere of Roman political life, augury sometimes served as a finely honed weapon. Military commanders often faced obstacles fashioned by their political counterparts, who would summon a dire omen like a raptor ready to strike, derailing campaigns through the invocation of divine displeasure. A polymath in politics could orchestrate such unfavourable readings through canny alliances with the Polari, knowing that revelation of such strings pulled in the shadow would bring severe reckoning. The strategic use of these rituals painted a vivid tableau of Roman politics, where connivance dwelled hand in hand with the sanctity of religious observation, thrusting senators into a tempest where faith and subterfuge clashed. Questions of ethics drifted like incense through the Senate chambers, with profound considerations on how divine will intersected with earthly governance. Should one tamper with omens, especially when the outcome of life's fragile fortunes hung in the balance? Was it acceptable to coax sacred practices toward the ambitions of the flesh? The devout shuddered at the thought, fearing divine retribution and moral decay, while others justified bending tradition as a necessity, viewing divine intentions as unknowable and therefore open to interpretation. This interplay highlighted a society where governance was a tapestry woven from strands of faith and practicality, urging the Senate to reflect on the paths carved by reverence and reform. In navigating Rome's vast empire, augury presented a unique check within its governing framework. Where modern systems employ secular balances, ancient Rome's polity intertwined with divine whispers to dictate the pace of policy and power. This oversight forced reflection. Every senator, as they manoeuvred their pieces on the chessboard of power, had to ponder not just the immediate consequences, but also the weighty echo of the divine. It was a model aspiring for a balance between prophecy and politics, shaping the state's trajectory across eras. As Rome's empire stretched its boundaries, the reliance on augury and its feathered prophets echoed through the annals of governance. Though later reforms would edge the practice into the margins, the legacy of divinely guided decision-making lingered as a thread connecting Rome's past to its imperial heights. This enduring influence served as a cultural memory, arcing across time through literature and public consciousness. Even as it waned in decisive power, augury's role in shaping Rome's narrative lingered, a testament to the delicate dance between tradition and transformation, ever present in the grand tapestry of human governance, a whisper across the ages that still resonates today. In the bustling heart of ancient civilizations, the Romans clung to their sacred chickens with a fervent devotion that left foreign eyes both baffled and bemused. Greek historians, masters of philosophy and reason, often found themselves in disbelief. Amid the rich tapestries of Greece, where the gods themselves were subjects of debate among scholars, the notion that the fate of wars hinged on a chicken's appetite seemed laughably simplistic. Polybius and Plutarch, with keen eyes and sharper tongues, documented Roman augury with a mix of wonder and amusement. The Greeks, inheritors of a rational legacy, puzzled over how such a primal custom could coexist with Rome's disciplined machinery of conquest. Yet beneath their mockery lay a hint of fascination, a grudging acknowledgement that these rituals, absurd as they seemed, were part of the framework that allowed Rome to expand its influence. Across the Mediterranean, the Carthaginians, no strangers to religious rituals, viewed Rome's sacred chickens through a similar lens of skepticism. They, too, consulted omens through the elaborate reading of animal entrails, yet found the avian aspect of Roman divination almost comically straightforward. The reliance on a peck to dictate military strategy was considered beneath their complex theological constructs. Nevertheless, the simplicity intrigued them, a curiosity that sometimes led to the adoption of Roman practices, particularly when interpreting signs of success or disaster. While derision echoed from Rome's rivals, its allies found wisdom in aligning their customs with Roman superstitions. The Etruscans, masters of divination themselves, effortlessly intertwined their sophisticated rituals with Rome's augury, crafting a tapestry of shared beliefs that knit the Italian tribes closer to their powerful neighbour. This cultural exchange extended beyond Italy, seeping into the Byzantine Empire, where Roman augury found a new audience. Initially scorned, these practices gradually wove themselves into East Roman culture, illustrating a practical flexibility in ancient traditions. Eastern empires steeped in their own divinatory practices offered a different perspective. The Persians, skilled in astrology, understood divine revelations manifesting in the cosmos. To them, chickens were merely another vessel for interpreting the divine, a point of quaint curiosity, yet one that resonated with their belief in nature as a canvas of divine messages. Similarly, Indian traditions, with their intricate systems of omens, shared a common cultural thread with Rome. While the specific focus on chickens might have appeared peculiar, the broader principle of animals as spiritual messengers was an accepted paradigm. Within Rome's own borders, the practice of augury did not escape criticism. Roman philosophers, influenced by Greek thought, often debated the logic of letting birds guide decisions. The Stoics, in particular, saw these rituals as social conventions rather than divine commands. Despite the skepticism, the societal impact of augury was undeniable. Even the staunchest critics had to concede the stabilising role it played, creating cohesion and giving commanders a perceived divine endorsement, or a chance to delay actions under the cover of inauspicious signs. Understanding Rome's fixation on chickens involves recognising the depth of religious obligation entwined with political strategy. Augury was more than ritual, it was a contract with the gods, ensuring that every action bore the weight of divine sanction. War, with its uncertainties, required this celestial assurance. The presence of these birds offered generals an unbiased decision, a clarity against the fog of ambition and pressure. Rome was not alone in its reliance on omens. Other cultures, such as the Egyptians and Celts, possessed their own traditions of reading the divine in the flight of birds or the shifting skies. The Celts relied on druids who interpreted natural phenomena into divine messages, while Egyptian reliance on bird patterns indirectly validated Roman practices, hinting at a shared human inclination to find meaning beyond the mortal realm. Yet, as with all systems of belief, Rome's augury found itself entangled in the web of politics. Wise senators and generals twisted tradition to their advantage, using a bird's reluctance as an excuse to recalibrate or stall. To Rome's neighbours, such manipulations reflected the absurdity of the practice. Still, these machinations were part of Rome's nuanced political landscape, a dance where belief and pragmatism coalesced. Participation in Roman augury signalled more than devotion. It was a diplomatic gesture, a nod to Roman supremacy, upheld through shared ceremonial participation. Allies partook in these rituals not just to appease the gods, but to ingratiate themselves with Rome, aligning their own destinies with the empire's. For those who embraced these practices, augury served as a bridge across cultural chasms, marking the sacred chickens not just as religious icons but as emissaries of Roman diplomacy. As Rome's empire expanded, so did its influence on how the world perceived such traditions. Initially mocked, eventually envied, the integration of Roman customs into foreign lands marked a shift in perception. Tribes at the empire's fringes softened their views, as second-generation citizens saw in poultry pecked prognostications not absurdity, but a shared identity. Thus the sacred chickens transcended farce, anchoring themselves within the annals of history as both symbols of Rome's mystical fervour and the ever-complex dance between innovation and tradition. Even as the empire crumbled, the tales of these birds lingered, a reminder of the timeless intertwine of belief, power, and human ingenuity. In the shifting sands of Roman history, a new dawn arrived with Augustus at the helm. As the first emperor, Augustus faced the Herculean task of steering a sprawling empire beset by its own traditions. Recognizing the need for change, he introduced sweeping reforms that redefined how Rome made its decisions. The reliance on sacred chickens, once seen as divine intermediaries in war strategy, began to wane under his pragmatic eye. Augustus valued real-time intelligence gathered by scouts over the unpredictable behaviours of birds pecking grain under watchful eyes. For a growing empire, decisions could no longer hinge upon a feathered nod. As Rome's borders extended, so too did its complexities, and Augustus streamlined military operations to reflect this new reality. The Polarius, once revered figures in military camps, found their status quietly eroding. They lingered on, more out of ceremonial duty than strategy. While they had once shared the commander's tent as trusted advisors, they now stood at the fringes, relics of a tradition being eclipsed by modern needs. Yet while the empire's heartbeat quickened with a drive towards progress, the echoes of tradition were not so easily silenced. The Polari became symbols of an older Rome, simultaneously present and absent, honoured and ignored. In the empire's expanding playbook, scouts and spies took centre stage, gathering vital intelligence with human cunning and stealth. Trained in observation, they unravelled enemy plots and mapped new territories, their reports often determining the success or failure of campaigns. Unlike chickens pecking for grain, scouts provided data that could be weighed, interpreted, and acted upon with precision. As Augustus laid the groundwork for a more efficient and responsive military operation, the empire's tactical prowess was built upon human insight over divine signs, marking a turning point from avian augury to calculated strategy. Despite these pragmatic shifts, the roots of augury ran deep. For centuries, Romans had looked to the heavens and to their feathered messengers for guidance, and old habits die slowly. Within the bustling markets and quiet villas, among the hum of daily life, augury remained etched in cultural consciousness. Rural communities, less touched by the epicenter of reform, clung to these ancient rituals, their feathers and omens entwined with local superstitions and traditions. Such practices illustrated Rome's cultural tapestry, a mosaic of tradition and adaptation, where old gods spoke from new voices. For legions on distant frontiers, these sacred practices held a place in the hearts of soldiers, even if unofficially. In the stillness before battle, some might secretly observe a bird's flight, seeking comfort in symbols their ancestors had revered. Augustus's reforms reshaped the military, but couldn't entirely sever the soldiers' spiritual ties. On foreign lands, away from the empire's heart, holding on to traditions felt akin to clutching a piece of home, a guiding star amidst turmoil. It's this delicate balance of adaptation and reverence that sustained the empire's soldiers through the chaos of conquest and conflict. As state and religion charted diverging paths, augury took a backseat in the public sphere, yet continued its quiet influence. Leaders embraced pragmatic decision-making, sharpening political and military tools free from the delays of divine consultation. Still, the emblems of augury thrived in the art and murmurs of Roman life, painting a picture of a people deeply woven into spiritual and cultural continuity. As Rome grew, practical governance demanded the disentanglement of religious traditions from the state's urgent agenda. Despite reforms, the old ways resisted diminishment. Augurs' strides toward modernity couldn't fully exorcise the spectre of superstition. Some generals still heeded auguries, viewing them as vital to understanding fate's whims. These beliefs, rooted in cultural DNA, illustrated the stubborn endurance of tradition against centuries of change. Although not officially acknowledged, reverence for omens reflected a society at a crossroad of belief, where divine signs could influence human actions, tracing patterns too intricate to unravel hastily. Amidst burgeoning bureaucratic expertise, the tale of sacred chickens threaded through the empire's vast regions, where cultural exchanges allowed for a blend of Roman and indigenous practices. In provincial corners where augury remained compatible with local beliefs, bird omens clung on, becoming part of the multicultural mosaic defining the Roman identity. From bustling city squares to rural enclaves, they continue to symbolise an enigmatic connection to the imperial past, enhancing Rome's cultural resonance across diverse landscapes. Ultimately, the sacred chickens of Rome present an evocative reflection on the cyclical nature of tradition and progress. As the empire transitioned from divine omens to logistical mastery, chickens persisted in memory and folklore, relics of a world steeped in mystery. Rome's evolution spotlighted the enduring dialogue between ancestral spirit and innovator, where the pulse of history beat not just with the march of soldiers, but with the whisper of wings. Sacred chickens remind us of the timeless dance between culture and power, fate and foresight, a rich tapestry where the divine imprint lingered, long after the echoes of their real-world calls had succumbed to silence. In the grand tapestry of ancient Rome, where swords clashed and empires crumbled, even the mightiest legions trembled at the whims of sacred chickens. These birds were not merely age-old traditions. They embodied Rome's intricate dance between faith and dayfare. Ancient generals poised on the brink of battle would often halt entire legions based on the pecking of these feathered oracles. Imagine those tense moments, with commanders pacing anxiously, soldiers primed for combat, and all eyes fixed on the arcane rituals of the Augurs. A paradox unfolds in this tale where supreme power was held captive by feathers, underscoring how divine favour was as crucial as military might. The fascination with sacred chickens was far-reaching, involving not just the soldiers and generals, but a complex web of religious and political figures who interpreted these avian messages. Similar to their scrutiny of the heavens, Romans looked to these birds for guidance, a testament to how deeply religion was woven into everyday life. Stories abound from this period, illustrating how a simple misstep, an overlooked grain, or a subtle ritual deviation could shift the tides of war. These tales, blending fable with genuine fear, show a society caught in the thrall of unseen forces, guided by the sharp beaks of sacred chickens. Romans' reliance on avian oracles reveals more than quirky adages. It lays bare a profound acknowledgement of forces beyond their control. While the era's architects plotted conquest and control, they also recognised the limits of human power. The chickens used in augury were revered as celestial intermediaries, cosmic arbiters in battles fought by men. This care reflected their esteemed status. Watched over with fervent attention, they were fed, observed and interpreted under stringent guidelines. For Romans, The gods, hailed as arbiters of fate, spoke through these birds, turning cold military strategy into an interwoven narrative of the sacred and the secular. Imagine a Roman general, strategies meticulously planned, suddenly stopped by a simple message from a chicken signalling divine unease. These moments demanded exceptional leadership, with commanders needing to relay to troops that stepping back wasn't weakness but respect for higher powers. By tying victory to divine approval, Rome justified its campaigns, comforting its soldiers amidst chaos. This blend of sacred ritual and military precision underscored Rome's unique approach, where war strategies and divine signs interlinked, each bound by the dance of destiny's unpredictable wings. In the complex tapestry of Roman society, the Polarius, keeper of sacred chickens, played an unsurpassed and crucial role. These caretakers, while unsung, carried tremendous weight, much more than their appearance, as mere animal tenders suggested. They served as conduits between human and divine, their actions carrying immense bearing on Rome's military and religious frameworks. Tales from the era depict a confluence of power and reverence, with Polari respected for harnessing divine communication through their birds' peckings. Despite appearing obscure, they held significant influence over generals, deciphering messages not through words, but through the silent language of sacred chickens. Within Rome's hierarchy of power, Augurs sat at the top, trained from youth in the art of interpreting the heavens and earth's signs. Their insights could alter the fate of thousands, their whispered readings framed through a bird's twitch or peck, sealing destinies with the reverence of cosmic architects. These advisors held sway not merely in preparations but within the full breadth of military actions. Such was their authority that commanders often placed trust in divine messengers over earthly instincts, guiding Rome's history with declarations from feathered messengers. But the chickens weren't always harbingers of victory. Sometimes they forecast disaster when ignored. The tale of Claudius Pulcher, dismissing his augury and suffering a catastrophic naval defeat at Drepana, is a cautionary narrative of hubris against divine signs. These stories, rooted in cosmic harmony, remind us of the dangers of ignoring deeper truths, where generals lead legions toward ruin, dismissing the soft clucking of the sacred. Each misjudgment etched a reminder in the annals, bridging the human urgency for success with higher cosmic balance. As Rome's empire extended, the reliance on these avian messages faded, though their legacy whispered through military tradition. With Augustus's reforms emphasizing practicality over ritual, this turning point led to divine augury's decline, yet didn't erase its essence. Despite changes, echoes of ancient beliefs occasionally surfaced, a yearning for divine clarity amidst the tactical planning. While strategic minds leaned towards scouts and data, this didn't fully sever ties with divine augury. The soft reminders of Rome's past stretched beyond birds and battles, into realms of timeless belief. Rome's neighbours too imitated this curious practice, seeing its effect on the empire's strategy. Romans weren't the lone readers of fate in feathers. Carthaginians, observing Rome's reliance on augury, integrated similar practices, albeit with skepticism. Even the Greeks brought their own divinations to this celestial game. Through ritual, these cultures exchanged ideas, a testament to the shared human struggle for control in chaos. Later, as Byzantine rule took hold, birds continued to be battlefield augurs, showing the timeless appeal of Rome's feathered guides, a universal quest to decipher the divine spectres of fate. Now, as you reflect on these tales of ancient omens and the intertwined destinies of men and birds, contemplate the delicate dance between faith and force. If this journey through history intrigues you, consider subscribing to our channel for more stories that bring the past vividly to life, illuminating how once mighty legions heeded the soft, sacred whispers of chickens at the crucible of conflict.